just seems like it was not a random act where somebody broke in and this, trying to steal stuff. Like, it just seems a lot more intentional than that. You think that you just took 2 lives, but you took so much more than that.
That's what had you call 911 in the first place. Like, were you having an argument with somebody?
If I didn't got into it, but I'm okay, I promise.
A 911 call reporting a domestic dispute was made months before the mysterious murders of an Ohio dentist and his wife. The unknown caller now revealed this morning. Plus, how could the family dog impact the investigation? Spencer and Monique Tepe's kids and their golden doodle Larry were all found unharmed inside the house. So we're asking, why didn't that dog bark? Also this hour, an au pair, an affair, and now a murder trial. We're talking to an expert about how often this common business relationship will become a problematic one. And we've got a shocking twist in a California courtroom as Nick Reiner's defense attorney withdraws from his case. We'll talk about how that surprising move could tip the scales of justice. It's all coming up next for you right here on Opening Statements. Good Thursday morning to you. Welcome to Opening Statements. I'm Julie Grant. Are you ready for some coffee and some court? This is the show where we get you all warmed up and ready to go for the big day ahead on Court TV Live. Got a big show coming up for you right now, so we'll kick it off as we always do. Grab that cup of coffee. It's time for my opening statement. A 4-year-old can ride a tricycle, recite their favorite storybook, tie their shoes, carry a conversation, and ask the question, why? Surely the 4-year-old daughter of Spencer and Monique Tepe is wondering why. Asking her uncle and others probably who are caring for her, why aren't her mom and dad here? Can you imagine how she's going to feel when someone eventually explains to her that they're gone? That precious child has been victimized in an unspeakable way. She and her 1-year-old baby brother have been made orphans by their parents' killer, the stealth savage who violated their home last week, has inflicted those innocent children with a lifetime of heartache and trauma. They were crying hysterically before police went into the house, and sadly, that is just the beginning of the pain that they have been forced to feel. I hope and pray those precious children get the love, support, comfort, and therapy that they're going to need to go through life without their mom and dad. And I hope and pray that police find the killer. And I sure hope prosecutors will consider the death penalty. That's my opening statement on this Thursday morning. Let me know if you like it. Right now, it's time for your daily docket.
Now, I'm going to deny the motion for mistrial over your objection, obviously. And I'm going to find under Heath, that, although it's not a prerequisite, that it was not intentional by the district attorney's office. It was negligent. And I don't believe what was testified to in front of the jury resonated enough to significantly affect your trial strategy.
In Texas, we've got the Uvalde school massacre trial for defendant Adrian Gonzalez rolling on. The cross of the teacher continues after the court denied the defense's motion for a mistrial. Court's going to start up at 10 a.m. Eastern time. In Washington, we've got the state's case continuing at noon today in the cheating fire chief murder trial for defendant Kevin West. This guy's accused of strangling his wife Marcy in order to be with his mistress. Also today at noon in Nevada, we've got sentencing expected for defendant and former porn star Devin Michaels. She's facing up to 51 years in prison for decapitating her ex-boyfriend. Right now, though, we turn to your top story as we're learning more about a 911 call that was made months before the shooting deaths of Ohio dentist Spencer Tepe and his wife Monique. In April of 2025, an unknown woman called 911 and reported a domestic dispute inside of the couple's home.
Hello?
Hi, this is 911. We just got a hang-up call. Is everything okay?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm okay.
Are you sure?
Yeah, I'm okay. Sorry.
Okay, well, it sounds like you're crying. Do you need police, paramedics, or anything?
No, I'm okay. I promise. I'm just emotional.
The mystery caller turns out to be a party guest who was fighting with her own partner, not with Monique Tepe. Spencer Tepe's brother-in-law confirms that and also says that the couple hosted a lot of parties, like to have people over, like to have parties at their house. Spencer and Monique's bodies were discovered last week when co-workers got very concerned and stopped by their home even to do a wellness check. The couple's 4-year-old daughter and 1-year-old son, along with the family's golden doodle named Larry, were all found unharmed. Investigators say they were in another room nearby when the shooting occurred. The children and the dog are now in the care of family members, but it has us wondering, why didn't the dog bark? Could this be another possible clue that points to a familiar killer? Let's talk about it. Let's bring in K-9 expert, retired police lieutenant Mike Gould, and retired FBI special agent Jennifer Coffindaffer. Good morning to you both. Lieutenant, I'll start with you and that question with the dog. What do you think?
Yeah, Julie, good morning. So, yeah, dogs make great ear witnesses. Often, law enforcement itself forgets that. Dogs are a sophisticated alarm system, and that's why we domesticated them to begin with many, many, many years ago. So, yeah, they distinguish friend from foe many times. Some dogs are more vocal than others. Labradoodles tend to be very vocal, where maybe French bulldogs, maybe not so much. So it is interesting, and not only the dog in the house, but dogs in the neighborhood. When that stranger, whoever he was, that suspect walking through the back alleys, that would have also alerted neighbors' dogs. So once you do your canvass of the neighborhood and find out when did somebody hear a dog bark, that would narrow down the timeline, in my opinion.
Yes, makes sense, Lieutenant. I have a clip of an interview done with Spencer Tepe's brother-in-law, Rob Misley. This was done by our Scripps affiliate local station in Cincinnati. Let's take a look.
How does this happen? This is such a rare thing, and two people that, not a single person could say a bad word about them, are killed in their home. It was her dad on the phone saying that Spencer is dead. And then finally I said, well, where's Monique? Where are the kids? And he said, well, Monique is dead too. They were always having people over. They were just the center of a huge community of friends and family that they were the glue. You don't know how to tell a 4-year-old that they're never gonna see their mom and your daddy again. It's, how do you, and how does the 4-year-old understand?
It's so dreadful, right? Jen Coffindaffer, I want to go to you, please, on the question of how investigators begin to tackle who would want to harm this beautiful couple.
Well, first of all, they have to start with the immediate circle. So they're going to be conducting interviews with all the people who were the very closest to the Tepes. Those individuals, people confide in their friends, people confide in their close family as to if they were having any issues. And law enforcement will run that information to ground, but also that digital footprint. We always talk about it, but basically any social media, any text messaging, what was discussed between the Tepes and other people that might alert law enforcement that there might have been a problem with someone?
Yeah, definitely. I appreciate that, Jen. Mike, I want to go to you about the use of canines in an investigation like this. We keep seeing that surveillance footage. Columbus police are asking anyone who can identify this person to come forward. It's hard to really see anything identifiable about this person. They're largely covered up. Tell me, can a canine be used in any way to track that person down?
Absolutely, Julie. And unfortunately, to this day, obviously I'm biased towards canines because I believe them as a very sophisticated technology. But our human brain looks for technology, surveillance cameras. That's just where we are, as Jennifer said, digital footprints. So dogs are a tremendous evidence recovery tools. So when you saw that video, the person walking in the back, you see his footprints. He actually leaves an impression on his last step when he steps into the frozen snow. He seems to step in the snow. A dog would, especially in this climate, in the weather, a dog would track those footprints hours later. And you'll see in the last step this person makes, he actually steps into the snow. And that would be preserved because it was in 20-degree weather. This is hunting season for dogs. This is tremendous. So, yeah, unfortunately for me, I'm a big advocate. And sometimes law enforcement, for whatever reason, maybe they don't have the resources, but they don't see these dogs as tremendous scientific technologies that can't be duplicated by any other technology. So the simple question is, yeah, dogs could certainly bring people to the right direction, maybe find weapons. They recover weapons, clothing, all the time. That's what they're trained to do.
Oh, I couldn't agree with you more, Lieutenant, rather. I'm such a big advocate. I've seen them save lives many, many times with cases I've had in person at the courthouse, things they've done, stepping in. I mean, they're just remarkable. And you hope everybody can get those resources in their community. I want to turn to the 911 calls now. Agent Coffin, I want to go to you on this. We have a little bit of a mashup, so to speak, of what came in that morning. Let's listen.
We're very, very concerned because this is very out of character. And we can't get in touch with his wife, which is probably the more concerning thing.
I can hear kids inside, and I swear I think I heard one yell.
What's changed since the last person I talked to?
There's a body. There's a body.
There's a body inside?
Yeah.
Okay, Agent Coffindeffer, you've really been digging in these 911 calls, the timing of them. Your thoughts today?
Well, you know, they still bother me, to be honest with you. I don't understand why an office that opens at 8, why, you know, everybody is so concerned that when you have other dentists in the office, 2 other dentists, fairly large staff of about 7 other hygienists and dental assistants that they couldn't cover for a half an hour. I also find it interesting that they went straight to the house. In other words, what about a car wreck? This guy had an hour and 15-minute commute. It was icy conditions, as we saw there. It just seems like a quick leap. But Julie, I wanted to alert you to something else that I'm trying to track and nail down. And that is Google searches specifically on this wedding video and also Google searches on Mr. Tepe. We saw this in the Brian Kohberger case. And I did a big a spread on it, and I'm working on the same thing here. Who in the world was Googling him at numerous times? Dr. Tepe, when he was never Googled before. We're seeing that on certain dates and also watching that video. So it's pretty interesting.
Ooh, boy, that's fascinating. You know, so somebody essentially could have been watching him from afar, doing some stalking behaviors from afar online. Ooh, that's chilling. Agent Coffindeffer, keep us posted on anything you learn regarding that. Lieutenant Gould, let me turn to you, because the calls and the timing, it may be strange, maybe not, right? Depending on this guy's habits. If he's such a creature of habit and like never in his life has gotten into the office a minute after 7 a.m., you know, maybe you can see why. If you're looking to talk to all those people, who do you start with? Do you try to find the person who kind of got the ball rolling with the panic? How do you do it? I'm curious how you go about interviewing all those people, Lieutenant.
Right, well, first of all, everyone's a suspect. Family members, business partners, the health of that business, because, I mean, it's the owner of the business called from Florida. I mean, again, we don't have enough evidence to suggest anything, but the police, I'm sure, do. I'm sure the police right now have a tremendous amount of surveillance cameras. They're interviewing all these people. Of course, they got to be very careful not to jeopardize the investigation. But you start with, as we always do, who's the first one? An hour and a half, as Jennifer said, is not a long time for the police to start a missing persons case. Of course, a welfare check was appropriate. They went and they left, actually, and then it was an employee who came, from what I understand, and actually saw the bodies. But yeah, you start from the inner circle and work your way around, and social media. All of these things will come to play. I don't think it's going to be a complicated investigation. I just think it's too early for law enforcement to start to show their hand.
Sure. That's really helpful, Lieutenant, how you said that. Everybody's a suspect when you start out, and then you weed people out as you go. And then I guess one final point, I'm thinking as you're talking, Lieutenant, and Jen, you mentioned this, that the long drive, how there could have been, a car accident or something, why everybody went to the house. That's a long drive to get to the house. It's not like it's, just a hop, skip, and a jump across town. So you wonder what time the person left to get there. It's all just kind of a head scratcher at this point. We'll see what happens and who police narrow things down to. We've got to leave it there, I'm being told. Great insight from you both. As always, Agent Jennifer Coffindaffer, Lieutenant Mike Gould, thank you both kindly. We're going to hit a break here on opening statements. Here's what's coming up next.
What? It's crazy here. I heard, I don't know what was that. And Brendan said, police dropped the knife, because he had a knife. And then he said, drop the gun to Brendan. They were yelling. I couldn't understand. It was super fast.
Oh, we got a marriage, a mistress, and a murder. Does an au pair invite an affair? We're looking ahead to Brendan Banfield's homicide trial. Plus, a chilling case back in the spotlight. Accused killer Nick Reiner facing the judge again. Shocking move, though, from his defense team. Talk about the latest developments in Hollywood.
I'm going to ask you a lot of intensely personal questions.
From the crime scene to the courtroom, this is Victim to Verdict.
Everyone has this heightened sense of anticipation.
What a day here at Court TV.
Fireworks both inside and outside the courthouse.
Let the cameras roll.
You don't have to get it all out right now.
I never saw her before.
You didn't see the girl before either? So the guy and the girl you don't know?
She's my boss.
Okay.
He's Valerie's mom. But I never seen it before. It's a lot of fun.
Oh, what a case this is going to be. The au pair affair murder trial is already trending in the world of true crime, and the case hasn't even started. It starts next week. Here are the facts. Prosecutors say that Christine Banfield was killed in an elaborate murder plot set up by her husband, Brendan, who's an IRS agent, by the way. State alleges that Brendan wanted to run off with the family's au pair. Her name is Juliana Magales. And he came up with this plan, so police say, to lure another man, a stranger really, over to the family's home by using a fake fetish website profile, essentially catfishing him. And that led the man to believe that he was actually meeting up with a woman to have consensual sex, right? So once police arrive, they find the wife, Christine, stabbed to death, and the strange man, who thought he was just coming over to have a good time, Joseph Ryan, shot to death. So 2 people are dead here. 2 people are also charged in this case. The au pair also already pleaded her case out. She pled to manslaughter charges, we understand. She has also turned state's evidence and going to testify against her former lover. The husband, his trial, Brendan Banfield, that defendant, he's set to go on Monday. So this case, it's so wild, so many twists and turns. It started up a conversation in our Court TV newsroom about au pairs and whether having an au pair can invite an affair. So let's bring in someone to tackle that question, psychotherapist and CEO of Life Counseling Solutions, Dr. Janie Lacey. And of course, we've got some questions about the upcoming trial. For that, we're going to talk to celebrity attorney John Phillips. Good morning to you both. Okay, Dr. Janie, with the question, can an affair be invited by the dynamic that's created in the house with an au pair?
I would say, Julie, no. But the arrangement can create risk factors when a marriage is already vulnerable. So when we think about an au pair, she's living in the home 24/7. She's witnessing the family's most vulnerable moments. And she depends on the employer for housing, for food, for a visa. So this can create opportunity for exploitation and not necessarily an invitation. And I think about when a wife is exhausted, in this case, she's an ICU nurse doing real life. You know, an au pair can represent escape and admiration without marital baggage. So to me, this is classic affair psychology, Julie. And we know that he had a pattern. He had multiple women confirm that Banfield had affairs throughout his marriage. And this wasn't about the au pair. It was about him. And she was 22 and 23. So she was foreign. She was dependent on him. He was 37, a law enforcement in control. Anyone inviting this, it was Brendan Banfield exploiting the dynamic. So the au pair didn't invite the affair. I think Brandon exploited a very vulnerable person who was dependent on him, Julie, for her livelihood and her visa. And that's not seduction, that's manipulation.
Oh, this is so fantastic, Dr. Janey. This is why we wanted to bring you on the show, because I think many of us were thinking you were going to say, yes, this does. Watch out for those affairs. But John Phillips, to think of it like in legal terms, as Dr. Janey was talking, I'm going, oh, yeah, okay, so this isn't entrapment. This is just fine. We're not, asking someone to do something they weren't already predisposed to do. If this guy is a cheater and philanderer, who knows? John, tell me, legally, does he have a chance?
Ooh, every Wednesday night when I get my Thursday night stories, I'm like, whoa, what a case. And this one I was like, what the heck? And of course, I'd say it hits close to home, but I do have 3 boys. We have considered an au pair. Any male is like, well, maybe we get a ugly, domestic woman like that. You bring somebody in, you do have psychological and emotional boundaries being tested. But yeah, this was him. This was his issue, and Margolies has a choice. She can go down with him, or she can try to use the system as best as possible to say, all right, I got the Oscar for my initial performance, but let me be clear, he did it. And that's the only way to save herself at this point, because right now, holy moly, what are people thinking?
Right, John. You can't make this stuff up. You really can't. You're right. One story is crazier than the next. This is so awful that this actually happened. It reads something like a fiction crime novel or something, but no, this is true crime. And to your point about, who do you hire? Do you hire somebody that, maybe you don't think is hot? We had that conversation in the newsroom. Dr. Janey, I would imagine you may have couples you counsel, who somebody doesn't want a hot au pair in the house because we might think an affair comes next. Talk to us, please, about that and how that can strain relationships.
I think what couples should fear is the warning signs in their own marriage, Julie. I mean, quite frankly. So I don't think we should demonize au pairs or babysitters, right? Millions of family have healthy professional relationships with au pairs. And this case was about 2 people allegedly conspiring to murder, right? So the arrangement was context, but it's not cause. I think the real threat here was the husband, right? Statistically, women are most at risk from intimate partners, not strangers, not employees. And Christine's greatest danger was sleeping next to her, right? So in this case, boundaries matter for families hiring live-in help. I think, as my co-panelist said, clear expectations, having open spousal communication and addressing your marital issues before bringing someone into your home. So I think, Juliana, she participated. Obviously we're seeing this going to play out next week. But this case to me wasn't about fearing au pairs or people coming into your home. It's about what happens when someone decides their spouse is disposable. And when you find a vulnerable person to help them act that out, that's not an indication of au pairs or babysitters. That's an indication of him in this case, in my opinion, Julie.
Yes, well said, Dr. Janey. Yes, you heard it straight from the expert. Don't fear the au pairs. There are many wonderful au pairs out there. I know somebody who worked as an au pair for a time and was a godsend to the family that she helped so much. And so, yes, we're certainly not speaking generally. Let's speak a little more in detail about this case. John Phillips, I want to share some details with you, get your thoughts here. Some more about the accusations against Banfield and his mistress, the au pair. So they were involved in a romantic relationship, police confirm, at the time of the murders. They were both, police say, behind that fake profile. They posed as the wife, Christine, so police say. So they made it look like it was her wanting to meet strange men to act out a rough sex rape fantasy, is what police reported. Joseph Ryan thought he was meeting up to do this consensual, act out this fantasy, brought a knife with him, police say, for that reason. And here's the icing on the cake. This couple's 4-year-old daughter was in the house at the time of the homicides. Now, the wife, police say, didn't know anything about this plot, that this was going to go down. So, of course, this is a normal day for her and the au pair to both be there. But to think about it, if this sinister plot was hatched by Dad, to have it in the house with his kid there? John, your thoughts?
No. And when somebody's talking about an au pair case, you know there are children, right? You don't have an au pair unless you're going to need nannying or babysitting or long-term care of children. And so in the stories, they don't talk about the children, but the fact that that child was there, you know, is just appalling. And it goes to the moral decay and degradation of this IRS agent. Like, this is somebody that's in a position of trust. And so it just, this case has so many unspeakables that are just offensive. And again, yeah, it's not an indictment on the au pair community, but when you bring people over from the country, and I think she was, you know, one of those that otherwise don't have the surroundings and the structure, sometimes they are susceptible to bad decisions and coercive control. Mm-hmm. And you know, it's horrible, horrible.
Yeah, so well said, John. I can't wait to see how she testifies. You were right. You know, she can either really help herself here and try to get out and have somewhat of a normal life ahead of her, or she can go down with them. The choice is going to be hers next week. This case starts.
Cheat. Don't cheat,
yeah.
Folks. And don't kill come on.
Yeah, don't cheat, don't kill. Yeah, if you want to cheat, go get a divorce. Call John Phillips, he'll help you out. I know. This is something called Dr. Janie. She'll help you out, too, to save the marriage. If you want to try not to get divorced, you guys are the best. Thank you so much. We'll hit a break. Coming up next here on Opening Statements, here's what we've got.
You waive your right to be arraigned today so that your matter may be continued to February 23rd, 2026 for arraignment?
The man accused of killing his parents, Rob and Michelle Reiner, back in court. We're spotlighting his latest appearance and what comes next for his legal fight.
Difference.
Welcome back. In our spotlight this morning, we're going beyond the glass at Nick Reiner's court appearance on Wednesday, how he looked and what happened. Reiner charged in the murder of his father, famous director Rob Reiner, and his mother, Michelle Reiner. Nick Reiner appeared in court for what was supposed to be his arraignment. We'll get into the legal wranglings in just a few minutes. But first, we want to talk about what he looked like. He walked in wearing a brown jail jumpsuit. Observers say that he was shackled behind a glass wall with his attorneys and that he peeked over the glass into the gallery. He was seen with sunken eyes, a shaved head, and facial hair. Reiner no longer wearing that protective vest that we saw him wearing at his first court hearing. After the hearing was over, his family issued a statement saying, quote, they have the utmost trust in the legal process and will not comment further on matters related to the legal proceedings. Now, we know Nick Reiner's attorney, Alan Jackson, withdrew from the case, and we're going to get to that a little bit later in our show. But right now, let's talk more about the impact that this case has had on Hollywood. I want to bring in now a special guest who's been following this case from the outset. She is the breaking news reporter for The Guardian. Danny Angiano is with us, waking up early on the West Coast. Danny, good morning. Thank you for being with us.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Of course. So I want to start with the impact on Hollywood, this case and the reach that Rob Reiner had, you know, in his career, the legacy that he has left. Talk to us a little bit, please, about what you've observed in the course of your reporting on this one.
Absolutely. Well, the killings have had just a really significant impact on Hollywood. It came right before the holidays, And Rob Reiner and Michelle Reiner were a legendary couple in Hollywood. I mean, I think so many people can think of a Rob Reiner movie that's their favorite. And so these were two really beloved legendary figures. And I think their deaths just sent shockwaves. They're so sudden and so violent. And I know a lot of people are grieving that.
Right, Danny. You know, and it all started on a fun night, as you know, at Conan O'Brien's Christmas party. They're with other, celebrities and colleagues in the entertainment industry having a great time. And then this. Danny, we're not hearing a lot about this party, and I know a lot of our viewers are so curious. Are you hearing anything more about what may have started the big fight that caused the Reiners to leave?
There's been some reporting. There's so much we don't know, but kind of what we have heard over the last few weeks is that there was some kind of party at Conan O'Brien's house, and that Nick Reiner was behaving unusually and making people uncomfortable. That's kind of been the reporting that's going around, and that there was some kind of conflict or argument underway there that unfolded that other guests heard. And, it was well known that that Nick Reiner, I think, had some troubles, and then just a few hours later, they were killed.
Right. And we know he's been a troubled young man for many years, Danny, and your reporting has touched on that. Would you kind of walk us through how great the effort was by Rob and Michelle Reiner to get him on the right path?
By all accounts, these were two parents who loved their children dearly. And in Nick Reiner's case, he was someone who had spoken openly about his struggles with addiction and with mental health issues. And his parents tried incredibly hard to get him the help that he needed. Numerous trips to rehab, and then 10 or so years ago, him and his father actually collaborated on a movie that was sort of based on, his life and the challenges that he faced. And in doing so, we learned a lot about just how much effort they put forth, and, the fact that oftentimes recovery in these things isn't linear, and that they didn't give up on their son. They tried really, really hard to help him.
Yeah, most definitely. And Danny, in terms of any indications of this, that homicides would occur. We know legally Nick Reiner's cloaked in the presumption of innocence. We know that. Investigators have indicated they're very confident that it was him, that he did this. They're not looking for anybody else. They believe that this was him and him alone who acted here. Were there any indications of him becoming violent or looking to target Rob and Michelle Reiner?
We have not heard anything about any prior history of violence or any acts of violence committed against them in the past. We have seen reports that there were previous police calls to the house in, I believe, 2019, and it seems as if those were connected to mental health, but there hasn't been any reporting so far that would suggest there was a history of violence. That said, law enforcement and the DA do seem very confident that this was the perpetrator. They arrested him, within hours of the killings, and the DA has said he's confident there will be a conviction.
Right. Danny Angiano, breaking news reporter for The Guardian. You've done such great work on this case. Thank you for coming on Opening Statements this morning. We'll look forward to talking with you again soon, we hope.
Thank you so much.
Take care. We're going to hit a break. When we come back, we're going to talk about the legal change. We saw defense attorney Alan Jackson withdrawing, not explaining why, though, saying something is beyond the control of his client, Nick Reiner. But what is that? Our attorney guest will weigh in.
What we've learned, and you can take this to the bank, is that pursuant to the laws of this state, pursuant to the law in California, Nick Reiner is not guilty of murder. Print that.
School shooting that broke hearts around the country
and broke trust with law enforcement.
Now the officer sworn to protect those students faces a jury.
The Uvalde School Massacre Trial. Live coverage today on Court TV. 8 hours of back-to-back true crime cases every Saturday.
This is crazy.
On America's original true crime obsession. 48 hours on Court TV. Saturdays starting at 4/3 Central on Court TV.
Upon entering the residence, they discovered the bodies of Mr. and Mrs. Reiner. Detectives from our Robbery Homicide Division Homicide Special Section immediately initiated a comprehensive investigation. The evidence gathered led to the arrest of their son, Nick Reiner, who was taken into custody later that night without incident in the Exposition Park section of our city.
Because at the appropriate time, the actual evidence involved in this case will be presented in a court of law.
So there's a major shakeup in the murder case for Nick Reiner as his attorney, Alan Jackson, resigns from leading the defense team.
Your Honor, at this time, I, on behalf of Watchman Jackson and Quinn, and with Mr. Reiner's understanding and consent, would ask to withdraw as counsel of record based on the conversation that we've had in chambers and the explanation that we've provided to the court in chambers. We feel that we have no choice at this juncture but to withdraw as counsel and ask to be relieved. The Public Defender's Office has been notified. We've had conversations with them. They are here. They're staffed. They're ready to take over. My understanding is they're ready for the appointment immediately.
Deputy Public Defender Kimberly Green, who serves in Los Angeles County, this is her, is now taking over as the lead defense attorney for the 32-year-old Nick Reiner, whose arraignment was postponed again. Now it's going to happen on February 23rd. So a lot of people buzzing about what comes next. Why did Alan Jackson withdraw? Okay, that's privileged information, as he indicated to both the court, who knows, they had chambers discussions, meaning behind closed doors with the judge, but to the public, he can't reveal why. But we can draw on our experience and provide some educated guesses as to why. So to help me do that, let's bring in our legal analyst guest this morning, attorney John Phillips, who is a celebrity attorney, does criminal defense work as well as civil work. Okay, John, so your initial thoughts after hearing what Alan Jackson said to the court. What do you think was going on there?
I've been making a lot of notes, so I'm going to start with his press conference, and I hope I don't get your questions out of order. But he said twice, pursuant to the law, pursuant to California law. He didn't say his client was innocent or his soon-to-be former client. So that kind of tells us there's going to be a premeditated dispute, right? A dispute over premeditation. And then what he told the court, and basically how these things work is when you're trying to discuss attorney-client privileged information, you go into an ex parte room with consent with the judge and say, Judge, he can't pay me. Or, Judge, this is my issue with a conflict. But I think we can draw on the conclusion that he's indigent enough to have a public defender, that Alan Jackson, as much as he may want to take this case, can't afford for his team to be able to take this case and operate at their standards financially.
Sure. That is a very real possibility, John, that Nick Reiner may not be able to afford the legal fees. That is quite frankly very possible. So that could be one possibility. Number one, it could be money that caused this. Number two, John, what do you think about a conflict of interest? You know, when a firm has to look at who they've represented in the past and if there's anybody who's going to come up as a witness or someone in the case, and there's a conflict that you just can't get around, wondering if could that be it? He didn't say the word conflict, although I don't know why he wouldn't if it was truly a conflict. I'm more inclined to think it was your first guess, money, but would you speak to that? You think it could be a conflict of interest?
Yeah, the two things that I would analyze on conflict of interest is, one, again, he's going from a paid, expensive attorney to public defender, which requires indigency. So that tips me away from that. But second, when we're doing conflict checks before we get involved, and we're required by every bar in the country to do a conflict check, we're supposed to do that before we start representation. Certainly conflicts can arise midstream, but on a high-profile case, you know, let's say when I was representing Joe Exotic, I'm not running around, grabbing other other Tiger cases or representing the prosecutor or you stay linear. You keep your oath of loyalty to this client. And so I don't think a conflict arose. Now, it could be that one was pointed out. Oh, oops, I forgot, or my partner represented this, Rob, the decedent. But again, I think if that were the case, they would hire another high-profile attorney.
Right, John. That's a really good point. Let's go back to that press conference, hear a little bit from Alan Jackson.
Circumstances beyond Nick's control have dictated that, sadly, it's made it impossible for us to continue our representation of Nick. But be clear, be very, very clear about this. My team and I remain deeply, deeply committed to Nick Reiner and to his best interests. What we've learned, and you can take this to the bank, is that pursuant to the laws of this state, pursuant to the law in California, Nick Reiner is not guilty of murder. Print that.
Okay, so let's unpack his two main points here. So starting with the latter about Nick Reiner is not guilty of murder. Alan Jackson choosing his words very carefully here. He's not saying he's innocent. He's not saying he didn't do these crimes. He's not guilty of murder. John Phillips, what did you think when you heard that?
There's another little clip where he twice says, under the laws of California. And he punctuates it with print that, not guilty of murder. And again, for the first degree murder charge that he has under California, it requires premeditation. And whether they're going to go that there was no premeditation, that this was a heat of passion issue that arose, or a mental health issue, those would make you not guilty of murder. And so, what Alan Jackson says in a press conference, look, he knows it. He's done it. And the one thing he's not going to say is, I'm not going to represent this man because he can't pay me at my standards, right?
Right. He won't say that.
You'd never do that.
If that's the case. Right.
And so here you are with a very emphatic, and that's again another reason I don't think it's a conflict of interest issue. It's a very emphatic, continued, loyalty to his case, while he, professionally just Homer Simpsons it into the bushes, it happens. My problem over the course of 25 years. Besides my hair getting curly in the back, and who knew? But my problem over 25 years has been taking cases that were for the right reasons, and then all of a sudden you're 5 years in, and you're pro bono to 1,000 hours, and it's fine for the attorney, but when you're doing paralegals and experts and all of that, it'd probably be best in this interest for him to be declared indigent and have the state help pay for his defense, right?
Right, John. I think you hit the nail right on the head with that maybe if it was a simpler case, like maybe something, really, really simple, like a retail theft case or something, where you wouldn't need lots of experts and investigations and lots of money spent outside. You could cut your costs as a lawyer, but the outside money is what would really be tough, and it just may not be there. I think you're right, John Phillips. Thank you so much. Love the Homer Simpson analogy there. That's spot on, and that was funny. All right, we'll see you soon, my friend. And friends at home, we thank you for being with us for this episode of Opening Statement. If you liked it, watch the show again, share it, tell your friends about it. Go to courttv.com.